right, so we're ready to get started. Would like to thank you all for attending this training session. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Epi Mabika, and I'm the founder and CEO of Step Up Youth, based here in London in the United Kingdom. So we provide platforms and programs for young people, particularly from the disadvantaged BME community in the areas of education, employment, and enterprise. And we also provide capacity building in the areas of leadership, community development, active citizenship, social engagement, and cultural heritage. So there's a lot more information that you can find as well on our website, which is www.stepupyouth.org.uk. So our organization is crisis responsive as well, in that we're able to pivot our services in order to provide solutions to current problems. This is why we've started the Care for Carers program, as we discovered that a lot of our young people were being orphaned as a result of COVID-19. So some of them in our area based in Greenwich, they either lost a parent or both parents. And we find that if their siblings that were there, they had to just step up and become a parent to their other siblings. So they don't necessarily have the right tools and equipment to cope. And this is why we've provided this platform. And we also find that there's a lot of informal carers that are not trained. So this will be able to provide equipment and tools for them to cope as well. A lot of our carers are also being burnt out and stressed out with nowhere to actually air their concerns and their views. And you're finding that this is producing a whole range of psychological and psychosocial challenges. So our culture training, culture sensitive training, is able to equip them with the right tools to cope for the bereaved young people and also for the carers that care for them. So all of us know that this year has been quite challenging in many ways, but at the same time, it's also highlighted the importance of our key workers. So our nurses, our delivery drivers, our cleaners, and of course, carers and informal carers. So we want to make sure that their mental and emotional well-being is also catered for, because we find that they tend to slip through the net as well. So with the challenges that COVID-19 brings and the lockdown, we also find that there's a lot of isolation, loneliness, depression, anxiety, and nowhere for the carers to actually come and network and de-stress. So with that in mind, we are starting a podcast called Real Talk, Care for Carers, where the carers can come and talk about their concerns, and we will invite a range of professionals to come through and teach them and give them nuggets about how to cope. We also realize that there's nothing quite like that in the market, so we want to fill that gap in the market as well. So if anyone is here that has joined and would like to be part of the podcast, either be interviewed as a speaker, or if you want to just subscribe and be part of it, do send us an email, info@stepupyouth.org.uk. So far in our project, we have partnered with a restaurant in order to provide meals for our carers and volunteers, and also just give them time to de-stress and get to network and know one another. And next week, we will be giving out culturally appropriate meals, hot meals, to the disadvantaged in our communities. Again, if you want to be part of this, we're doing it on Thursday, which is Christmas Eve. You can get in touch with us as well, the same email address. So would like to thank our funders, the National Lottery Community Fund, who have enabled us and sponsored us to be able to put up this project and all the activities surrounding this. And I'd also like to acknowledge the presence of our training director, Mary, who will be coming to do some mindfulness training with us in between. And also Zoe, who is our project officer, and she is one of our young people at Step Up Youth. Been working very hard behind the scenes, and what we want to try and do is to empower the young people, put them at the forefront and give them the opportunity to co-create solutions together. So we realize that it's important to actually put a young person and be able to put our mission, to see our mission in action. So Zoe, if you're there, would you like to say a couple of words for us? Zoe?
Hi, yeah, I'm here, sorry. Sorry, I was just gonna say thank you for the opportunity for me to like be the project officer. Obviously, as you've been talking, it's a very serious topic that we need to like take into consideration. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to grow and just help out in anything I can.
Wonderful. That's really good. Thank you so much for logging in, and thank you for the hard work that you're doing behind the scenes, Zoe. I will be excited to see your growth and to see what can come out of this project, and hopefully you can become a mentor for other young people. So Zoe's 18 years old and she's already engaging in these activities and projects as well. We're coming up with all sorts of models, time management, productivity models, and everything that can help us towards this this project as well. So the way our training will be structured is such that today we've got all our trainers on. However, for the subsequent training days, we will have one specific trainer that will zero in on their topic. So if you do have questions for a particular trainer, just reserve them for when we will be having that particular trainer. For today, in the interest of time, we will be having just one Q&A. And if we do have a little bit of time after, we can always have another Q&A session. But we really wanted the trainers to be able to have a taster, so it's like a teaser session, and also to see with the demographic of people that we have logging onto the training what your needs are, so that we're able to meet them appropriately. So in terms of housekeeping, I'll just ask everyone to mute their buttons so that there's no background noise that will distract the trainers. And if you've got any comments and questions, by all means, pop them in the chat and we'll be able to address them as we go along. Mary will also help us to keep our time. So if she comes, if you're one of the trainers speaking, and if you're going a bit over your time, she will come and also help us out there. So without much ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker, who will be talking to us about the impact of trauma and coping strategies for carers. Her name is Sandra Mutandabari, and I will just read her bio. Sandra is a chartered and registered practitioner psychologist. She brings 25 years of experience to the field of mental health. She has extensive experience of working with individuals, groups, adults, adolescents, and children to treat emotional problems within the NHS, Ministry of Defence, social services, voluntary sector, and private sector. Sandra also has a keen interest in cross-cultural work and integrating spirituality or faith in therapy and mediation. Sandra has also worked as a certified victim support volunteer, supporting victims of crime, including sexual violence, domestic abuse, and she also offers expert witness services, supervision, and in-training therapy for trainees. So Sandra, the floor is yours. You can take it away.
Okay, thank you, Epi, for this platform. Welcome, everyone. Just looking forward to sharing on trauma. So I will wait for my slide to be put up, and then we can go ahead.
So we're just waiting for Mary to put the slide up.
Okay, so Mary, will I be able to control it from my end?
No, I'll have, let me see if I can give you the control.
Thank you, so that we don't, okay.
You should be able to, I think, yeah, now.
Okay, all right, okay.
Just try it out, see if it works.
Okay, so we will be talking, I'm going to share a little bit about the impact of trauma and a little bit on coping strategies. We all can, attest to the fact that especially this season we've just had of the pandemic, there's been a lot of impact on mental health, and some of the experiences have been quite traumatic. So whether it's physical health that people have experienced, having the COVID itself, So that would mean after they've experienced the COVID, which was near-death experience for a lot of people, they are left with symptoms of trauma. And then those who are caring as well for those people would experience what falls into the category of trauma as well. So what we're going to cover today is looking at definition of trauma. What is trauma? And then I will cover a little bit about the types of trauma, so people know the different types of traumas that people can experience. And also we will talk a little bit about how trauma affects us, and then we will look a little bit on coping strategies. So as Epi said earlier on, that this is just an overview, a taster of things to come in following sessions. So I will not be going into depth, but just covering an overall picture of what is involved with trauma. So I am going to now click the next slide. I'm not sure how I'm going to do that. I'll have to ask for your help, Mary, because it says you're controlling. Okay, so I'm controlling your screen. Okay. Yeah, okay, yeah, it's working. Oops, yeah. It's working. So the next slide is talking about defining trauma. So trauma is an experience that is emotional, that comes following an event such as an accident, rape, or natural disaster, death. All that, the emotional response is what we refer to as trauma. And then on my next point, it says, however, a person may experience trauma as a response to any event they find physically or emotionally harmful. So, it could be you've actually experienced maybe perhaps something like back pain or back injury that also can be classed as a physical trauma. So those are just two simple definitions of trauma, so you have an understanding that it's mostly around an emotional response. You have to bear with me, my mouse is doing its own thing, okay? So types of trauma. The first type of trauma I'm going to talk about is what we call acute trauma. This is a result from a single stressful or dangerous event. So for example, a driving accident, a car accident, that's a single acute trauma that one experiences. And the next point I have there is chronic trauma. So chronic trauma is when you have had, it's a resulting from repeated and prolonged exposure to highly stressful events. So if, for example, we take guys in the military, they might be constantly going into a place where they're exposed to traumatic situation. So that would be classed as chronic trauma. So here it says examples include cases of childhood abuse. So if, for example, with a child, you're going to school and you're constantly being bullied, you're constantly experiencing bullying every time you're going into school. That is what we call chronic trauma, because it's an ongoing, long experience of a traumatic event. And also domestic violence. I think there's a lot of talk about domestic violence during this COVID period as well, where perhaps perpetrators of domestic violence now have an opportunity to actually do that more on a regular basis, because you're in confined spaces, you're living together, there is no way to escape. So, with domestic violence, it's chronic, because again, it's about the period of time in which the person experiences the trauma. And then we have what we call complex trauma. Complex trauma is really a result of exposure to multiple trauma events. So sometimes I'll get people come for therapy where they have just had a traumatic incident, which as we begin to explore what perhaps triggered it, we find that they've got other traumas in the past, like maybe they had a childhood trauma where an example is, I had a case where someone had been assaulted, had been sexually assaulted, and the person that assaulted this person covered their mouth And this was a couple of years ago, so you would not have thought much about that. You go through your therapy and you heal. But now that we've actually had COVID come up and people are required to wear masks, the immediate effect of actually wearing that mask has triggered all the emotions associated with the sexual crime that happened in the past. So they start psychologically taking themselves back to the car park where that incident happened. So what has happened there is this requirement to wear a mask is triggered. And so that's complex trauma. So the person thought they'd actually healed from that trauma when they did the therapy, but another event has actually now re-triggered the memories of that. So that often happens in relationships. Something might have happened in childhood, and then you enter into another relationship, and historic trauma is then activated. So you see people wearing the blue lanyards to say that they're exempt from wearing masks. There's so many reasons behind it. So people cannot really share openly in public that the reason I'm wearing this is because of that. Nobody would have ever envisaged that that particular traumatic incident would be relived in a pandemic such as what we're going through. So that's an example of chronic trauma. And then we've got of complex trauma. Then we've got what we call secondary trauma or vicarious trauma. So vicarious trauma is something that most carers or people who work in the caring field might experience. And as it says here, it's a form of trauma. A person develops symptoms from close contact with someone who's experienced a traumatic event. So secondary trauma will be where someone else in your family or someone close to you has actually had a traumatic incident. And then because you're sharing that story and you're not really trained to be listening to that, you can actually start experiencing traumatic experiences yourself. So death is a good example where someone might be talking about, someone was found hanging, and then you, the listener, experience that as secondary trauma. And vicarious trauma, as I said, it's from, for example, I listen to a lot of trauma, but I have to take myself to supervision to offload and explore and find ways to cope with that. So it's important that if you are in a caring field where you do end up being exposed to vicarious trauma or secondary trauma, you also take care of yourself. So so those are the types of traumas that you will come across as you do your caring. And the effects of trauma. So the effects of trauma, a traumatized person can feel a range of emotions, both immediately and after the event. So sometimes you don't feel anything, you're in freeze mode, and you then later on, days later. So sometimes people don't understand, for example, the process of bereavement. It's not a staged thing. People react differently, and sometimes you have triggers that might actually lead to your reaction in a particular way 5-10 years later. And we often then have this language of, oh, shouldn't you be over it by now? Or surely you should move on. But actually human beings are very complex, and we need to realize that healing is a process and it doesn't have a timestamp to it. So in the long term, as it says, and then they may feel overwhelmed, helpless, shocked, or have difficulty in processing the experiences. So trauma can also cause physical symptoms. There's a good book called The Body Keeps Score. It talks about how your body actually literally keeps score. Your body can even remember some things that happened to you. I came across a case where the person actually remembered being born. They actually remembered being born, and that was, an experience that many of us won't actually remember, but their body, was able to keep the memory because as a baby, you're still forming. So that's the trauma can cause physical symptoms. Trauma can have long-term effects on a person's well-being. If symptoms persist and do not decrease in severity, it can indicate that the trauma has developed into a mental health disorder. And so now we hear PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, acute, that's when you really need medical attention and you need to be seen by a physician in order to think about whether you need therapy or you need to be on medication, because sometimes you're needing to deal with some of the symptoms of anxiety to calm you down to be able to function in your day-to-day business. So coping strategies. exercise. So the coping strategies, if you think of yourself as spirit, soul, and body, you know, whatever coping strategies you're going to use will be targeting either your spirit or your soul or your body. So it covers all those areas. And sometimes some of our interventions with regards to coping with stress, with trauma, may seem simple, but it's things that we take for granted and we don't do as much as we ought to do. And the very first one there is exercise. So trauma can activate the body's fight-flight response. So you're now constantly in hypo or hyper alert. So when you're hypo, it means your responses are not quick, you dissociate, you're numb. So you have people who've experienced trauma in childhood, and in relationships, they tend to cower when you start going to a certain subject. They really kind of freeze, and you don't want to live a life like that. So, and then flight, you're constantly wanting to escape or run away from the emotions. So it's really more about emotions. There's no real danger going on. It's really more about, you know, the emotions. So exercise can help to mitigate some of these effects, because exercise increases endorphins and other bodily chemicals that are good, you know, dopamines and all those things that are good for the brain and relax you and all that. So the body can actually heal itself before we even go as far as taking medication. So being mindful that as a human, you're created to be able to to engage in self-healing. And then the next point I have there is mindfulness. So mindful breathing, I think we're going to have a session there from our coach about being mindful and other mindful-based exercises that can ground you in the present, in the here and now. When you start having these thoughts, you know, it can stop you from reliving the trauma. So once we get into in depth of that, you will then understand that just simple breathing exercises can help to calm your nervous system down. So the one thing that we have to remember, I will probably present it at some point, the effects of trauma on the brain and what's actually happening, the firing, the misfiring of some of the brain activity that goes on with trauma. So mindfulness, and by mindfulness, I mean how many of us actually sit at the dinner table and really chew and enjoy and savor our food. We live in such a rush. We're constantly anxious. You know, I've got this appointment, I've got to do this, such that we actually lose that ability as humans to be present and to actually be still and enjoy the moment, because you're never going to relive another moment once it's gone. It's a bit like this 2020. It's gone. Yet there is so much that a lot of us could have done, but because we were all in anxious state, oh, when is this coronavirus going to end? Well, it's here, it was with us. Then we needed to switch off and focus on something else that's more productive. So there's been some good news, and you know, people being productive in the season. But I think a few people have also been caught up with not being mindful to say, well, it's out there, but in the meantime, what can I do? Go for a walk and exercise and do all other things that are beneficial for me. And then connection with others. This one has been very critical when I've been talking about the COVID, that we shouldn't be calling it social distancing, but it should be called physical distancing, because you need to maintain social contact. In a time like this, you shouldn't be socially distancing. So I think it's a misnomer to say that people should be socially distancing, because that creates a lot of psychological problems, mental health issues, and isolation is not good for people. So really, we are talking about physically distancing, but maintaining social contacts. People have used Zoom, phoning each other. You know, those are things that actually help in times of traumatic situations. So withdrawal from others is a common symptoms of trauma. So, you know, when you're traumatized, you actually even do that more, where you should actually be connecting with family and friends. So we are all in this communal trauma from COVID. We are all experiencing it together, but what is critical is that we should also just be connecting some more, rather than, you know, distancing ourselves. So this is more of a, you know, social, emotional connection, but physically being able to stay safe. And then what I have there is a balanced lifestyle. So here with the balanced lifestyle, a person with trauma may find it difficult to relax or sleep However, things like sleep, relaxation, and diet play a role in mental health. I'm not a nutrition therapist, but I have actually friends who I probably will recommend to EPI who can come on board and talk about the importance of nutrition at this point, in the pandemic and generally in life, that nutrition, good nutrition also supports us in terms of recovery from physical and psychological, difficulties. So sleep, I'm guilty of that myself, but when I was reading my notes and preparing, it says 7 to 9 hours. So really time management, finding, yourself, time to relax and sleep, and a good diet, and just reading a good book. All this play a role in a balanced mental health, especially when you've experienced trauma. And then the next slide, oops. So the effects of trauma. So my next slide says support, I think, is it? Yeah, coping strategies and then support. So if necessary, people can ask for support from others, which is what I was just saying earlier on, that we need to learn to communicate how we're feeling. Everybody's in this together. And this includes talking to trusted loved ones or joining support groups such as this. This is a very good example of a platform where people should be able to come and speak. I think I'll be taking part in some bereavement cafes where people of Black and minority ethnics will be coming in just to kind of talk about the existential issues around death and dying, because it is a season where we are faced with not problems that can go away, but a need to realize that death is with us from the moment you're born. The only thing you're guaranteed is death, but yet we spend half our time trying to escape it. And so just coming to terms with that this is a given can help us to live our life more intentionally, so that there is all those support groups out there. Because if you look at trauma is happens, and the reason why you react that way is because it's a near-death experience. And so death is very much integral part of the whole experience of trauma. And then on my last point there, I've just put seek professional help. So that could be a therapist, and your GP can recommend. These days, there's so much that you can access for free. The NHS has therapy. There are support groups, actually. I think when I worked in the NHS many years ago, there were actually carers groups where you could even be given respite, holidays, and be able to take time off for yourself. So thank you very much for listening. So this was really an overview, and I hope I stayed within my time, but I understand that there is questions that may pop up.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Sandra. That is such an excellent presentation, very insightful. I hadn't realized that there are all these different categories of trauma, different sections of it. And what stood out to me was the complex trauma of knowing that something as simple as wearing a mask can actually trigger emotions from people that have been gagged in the past. So these are things that as we go around, it's important to be sensitive to this, so we're not just judging people as we go around. And it really has opened up my eyes to the different types of trauma. I would also like to find out if anyone has got any questions for Sandra. If someone, so far we've been having very good Sandra, that's very deep. Who would have thought that using specific words can psychologically affect us? Culturally, some people view trauma as weakness. So those are the comments that we're getting. So if people don't have any questions, I'm really excited to
Can I
also
just
be then
ask a
listening.
question, please?
Yes, go ahead, Constance.
Yeah, I just want Sandra, please, to explain. Thank you very much. I should say that was great, your teaching. I learned a lot. I just want to know the difference between trauma and grief.
Okay, so grief is a very natural process in terms of, I know there's stages of grief and all that happens. So you can experience trauma when there is a particular, for example, a death that's traumatic. So, but the grief within that, so you could experience some secondary trauma, but with grief, it's a natural process that comes with the loss of a loved one, for example, where you are going through stages which are part of a natural response of responding to a loss. Whereas with trauma, it's not that death is expected as such, but trauma, I think, is more jarring to the emotion in the sense that it's not it's not in your existential. By that I mean, the normal life day-to-day experiences. So the way that we will deal with trauma is slightly different from the way that we will deal with grief, in the sense that the impact on your emotion may not be in the same pathways of your thinking. So with trauma, for example, it may actually cripple you from going out to work. But if you lose a loved one today, your thinking is not such that my life is in danger and therefore I can't go out to work. So it's the different impact that it has on you in terms of your behavior and your thinking as well, and your emotions. The anger, for example, is very common in grief process, and it's not always necessarily a big element in trauma. Trauma, I think there's an element of fear more than anything, whereas with death, it's more, the kind of anger that, you've lost this, you're trying to find an explanation why someone has died. So there are some slight overlaps, but with trauma, it's a slightly different experience. Whereas with bereavement, it's actually okay to go through the bereavement process and allow yourself those emotions because they are quite natural. So we do actually call that a natural reactive process. Whereas with the trauma, there's a sense that your thinking is actually altered to some degree. So when you have grief, you don't necessarily have a change in your thinking and view of the world as such.
Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you. And Sandra, just another quick question. I had thought it was a comment, but from Auxilia, she's asking, is it true that culturally some people view trauma as weakness?
Yeah, I've just admitted myself. Sorry, let me just expand myself. So say the British culture, it'll be like, well, stiff upper lip. We tough it out. And then maybe from, Zimbabwean culture, it'll be like, that's a white person's condition. You just get up, pick yourself up and you go. And that's kind of where I was just kind of coming from and what your views are.
Yeah, I think I do agree with that. Culture has a lot to play with how we deal with and experience trauma. So I think if we think about the South African concept of Ubuntu, you can actually be quite traumatized, but the way that your culture embraces and walks with you post-trauma is not as judgmental. For example, if we take simple rape cases, it might be that in some cultures, there's a language and a narrative about looking in at you as the one that perhaps evoked this. And therefore, you almost have to tough it up because the way the culture has, stereotyped and perhaps they've labeled, stereotyped certain experiences can actually have an impact on how you respond yourself. So there are cultural aspects to how trauma is experienced and dealt with. And there is issues of discrimination, there is issues of, prejudice in terms of traumatic experiences as well. So I find I work a lot with the police, and in that there's a lot of bravado where, again, these are police officers, but they're being exposed constantly to finding people hanging, finding people burnt. At some point, the capacity you have as a human being reaches top, and your reaction will be such that you get burnt out. I saw a lot of that in the military, where that you go out there, but after a while it has a massive impact. But because you're in the military, it's like, oh, we got to tough it out. And so there was, I think in the old days, it was called shell shock, where years later, they've now realized, and therefore now I think there's a general change in most cultures with regards to that. I think it's even a bit like an example of depression in Zimbabwe, because again, you had your society would look after you if you're postnatally depressed. You didn't have room to be depressed because people took your baby, they did all that. here you will be postnatally depressed if you're in a flat on your own. So the culture itself actually can perpetuate the experience of some traumatic incidences. You've given birth, you're on your own, it's a very life-changing situation. And it can be very traumatic as well for some people, you know, and so you're in isolation. So there is a lot of culture that comes into play with how we manage these things. And some of it, even medicalizing it is a bit, is complicated, because some of it is a natural response to a difficult situation. So you have to really balance that you're not, you know, labeling it and medicalizing it, but allowing people to explore it. And I think that's the difference with psychiatry and psychology. You're differentiating between, you know, medicalizing a natural experience.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I just wonder whether part of what you're saying as well is that there's that support for trauma as a group. So if you experience it as a group, so thinking about maybe like in Zimbabwe, maybe the people who saw the war, you know, the Zimbabwean culture, where there was no counseling, but as a village, you would talk about it, you would kind of almost deal with it yourselves, not medicalized, but maybe that's how it was dealt.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for that question.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you, participants. It's good that you're actually interacting with us. Sandra, this is an excellent presentation, and we're looking forward to your in-depth training day as well. So guys, keep all your questions, and in the interest of time, we're going to move on. At this segment, we're going to ask Mary, Coach Mary, to come and do some mindfulness training with us. So Mary, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Epi. And of course, with view of time, I'll go right into it. And I just wanted to share like mindfulness, because Sandra did mention it earlier, which is awesome, because it's something that I coach around awareness and coming into that mindfulness, and working with leaders, and also recognizing that also carers are leaders in a way, what they do. And sometimes you can end up doing and not focusing on who you are within and coming into that present moment. So I always use this trick a lot of times. Well, it's a trick, it's our way of living. You may not have noticed, but we have our 5 senses. And it's great to do this anytime you go, whether you're walking, whether you're sitting down, whether you're listening to a presentation or you're listening to something. Use your 5 senses to mindfulness. It's a quick way to just come into that present moment. 5 things you can see. Just take those moments just to notice 5 things you can see around your space when you're walking, mindful walking. 4 things. Today we're going to just do 1 because of time, because I'm going to put just 1 minute and we're going to do 1 of them. And then you can do 5 things you see, and just take this moment, no judgment, just take notice of 5 things, and in that place you'll be mindful. 4 things you can feel. That can be you physically feeling something, can be like what you're wearing, the texture, the feel, or even your hair. You want to just feel the texture of your hair and wanting to see how does that feel like. Or you can go into that space of just even feeling sensation. It can be just your skin pores, or feeling how your cloth feels on your skin, and the pressure and everything, just taking notice. Then you can go into this next part of 3 things you can hear. It can be something close by, where you can hear the sound of my voice, that's more apparent. But then you can also even go a bit further, even as I'm speaking, try go further and see what can you hear around the space you're in. And then you go to the 3rd one, as far as you can go, what's the farthest you can hear, and just taking notice of just the sense of hearing. And then it goes to the set 2 things you can smell. Just smell, just taking that notice of breathing and just smelling something. Like, yeah, Sandra, I love how you lift up your cup and you smelled your tea or something you're drinking. Just taking notice of the smell. 2 things you can smell. And then last of it is 1 thing you can taste. 1 thing that you can taste on your tongue, and just taking that moment to taste and see what can you taste around your tongue. And that's mindfulness. It's a great way to just do when you're walking, and you just need that moment just to be present wherever you are. So today we're just going to take breathing, because that's the most easiest way to be mindful. Just taking notice of your breath. I'll put 1 minute on the clock, and I'll put a timer, and just take notice of your breath. No alterations, no manipulation, just notice how you breathe. And anytime you find yourself going into thoughts, just come back to your breathing. So you ready?
Yes.
Okay, great. So starting right now. just take notice of your breath. You can close your eyes if you find it much more simpler to focus, and just take notice of your breathing. You can bring your attention to your nose and just take notice of just your breath in and your breath out. And just keep taking notice, just breathe. There's one great treasure we all have, breath. And 1 minute is up. See how quick that is? And
Wow.
That's mindfulness. Power of now. Over to you, Epi.
Thank you so much, Mary. Wow, how insightful as well. The 5 things we need to be aware of. So I'm also really looking forward to you taking over one of the sessions and giving us more in-depth time when we do have the other sessions following through. So thank you so much, Mary. So next up, we have our next speaker is Constance Webster, who will be speaking to us about cultural aspects of care for bereaved clients and relatives. A bit of a bio for Constance is she has worked in education for over 30 years, the last 10 of which have been spent transforming the lives of others in her own training center, where learners receive caring support on their journey to success. She has celebrated the achievements of hundreds of disadvantaged individuals and has been also helping people and young people and normal others that are not young, sorry, to get into employment and get a promotion or a place at university. So please welcome Constance Webster.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm very interactive, so we are going to do this together. We are in this together.
Yes.
So, as you heard, I don't want to waste time, but I think we will enjoy it because we are doing it together. It's not only for me. As Epi said, before I talk about Epi, Sandra, thank you so much. I really enjoyed what you said. And thank you for taking part of what I'm going to say.
Thank you.
Yes, because I'm doing cultural aspects of care for bereaved clients and relatives. So before we go any further, I just thought of defining cultural aspects. Culture consists of beliefs, behaviors, objects, and other characteristics common to the members of a group or a society. So the examples I will give are for the cultures I'm familiar with. My background is Zimbabwe. So, and I know some aspects of BAME and African cultures. So I'll be mixing that. And I would also like you to contribute so that we work this together because we are growing in this together. COVID-19 has never been, so no one really knows. So we are learning while the book is closed. Why I say that we are learning while the book is closed is it means we are learning by experience. So we put our experiences together and we'll quickly learn. So through culture, people and groups define themselves to conform to shared values and to contribute to the society. Therefore, culture includes many societal aspects like language, customs, values, and norms. So we've got our cultures, we've got our backgrounds, and we've learned from traveling and from living in a diverse society like United Kingdom. Is comprised of different cultures. Any culture you want to see, most of them are here. someone was saying, there's no need of going on holiday because you want to go and experience other cultures. They are all in the United Kingdom because of our diversity. So let me go to bereavement as well. Bereavement is a period of mourning or state of intense grief. I think Sandra has done it, has explained grief and bereavement very well. It's getting clearer to me. These words intertwine. There are things you find in bereavement, and there are things you find in grief. Like I was asking you, what the difference between grief and trauma, so, and bereavement as well. If we look at them, there's an intersection where we'll find that what you find in grief, you find it in bereavement, you find it in trauma as well. So bereavement is a process that includes going through several stages of grief. Bereavement can also be used more generally to mean the state of having lost something very dear. So we go back to our topic. It's saying cultural aspects of care, cultural aspects of care for bereaved clients and relatives. We shouldn't forget that we are talking about Youth Step Up. So we want to also look closely to our children and young people, especially, so that we understand what they are going through and we know how we can teach them or how we can help them cope with the situation. So before I go any further, before I waste any time, let's look at the cultural aspects. We'll do this together. Yeah. So Sandra has already said some of the cultural aspects we know from our background. If we have left something, I'll give you a minute to add. Like you said, men are not allowed to cry. You say people will say you are very timid or you are a coward to men. Sandra has already talked a lot about it. And so men keep their depression in them, in our culture, because they don't want to be seen crying and they don't want to be seen as cowards. And sometimes when they're even not feeling well, they will not come out because they want to remain strong. There's a way which Sandra said, when men don't cry, especially the ones in the army, is the way you expressed it. I don't know if you can remember, Sandra.
But the bravado.
Yes. So they don't cry mostly. So they are dying inside. By the time they burst out, it can cause a mental breakdown. If you see them broken, they cry, but they keep it in for a long time. When they get the chance to, you also cry with them because they can cry. Is there anyone who wants to add any cultural aspects from your background, please? I still have more. I just want you to be in this with me. We are in this together.
I think Zoe's got a comment. If you can comment, Zoe. If you unmute yourself and comment.
I was just saying, I didn't know how to say it out loud, but I was just saying that, like, I was just agreeing, saying, you know, how culture can create stuff like toxic masculinity, which is very serious, especially for people my age group, especially the guys. They feel like they can't be themselves, or like wear pink, for example, and it's now like a big no-no. So yeah, I was just agreeing, really.
Yes, thank you.
There's another point that maybe, Constance, you're going to cover, because I've looked at death and dying in different cultures, the Muslim culture, the Christian and the African tradition and the Jewish, and it's around the loss of children. And maybe you'll cover that, you know, in terms of how the grieving process is done, or when there's a bereavement of a child. So the Shona
okay,
culture might do it in a different way, but I just thought, that might be something you might cover anyway.
It's okay to do it. I'll explain how in my culture, if a baby dies, the culture is they are not buried in a cemetery with everyone else. They go to near somewhere where there's water, near the river or somewhere wet. Very early in the morning, men are not allowed to go. It's only women who go to bury the child. That's what I know. I don't know if there's someone who wants to share about a death in a different culture, like.
I was going to say the same in terms of when babies die, don't they say you don't cry?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to say as well, that you are not allowed to cry. You are just supposed to quietly take the baby. And also, it's not done by young women. It is done by women who are over age, women who are in their menopause stage, like the old women. They are the ones that go and bury the child.
Yeah. And the reason, just to add, the reason for that is they say you don't cry, or women who are still of childbearing age don't go because they say you won't be able to have children. It's almost like whatever's eaten your child will come and eat all your children. So yeah, and can you imagine the impact on the mom who's lost her child, on her grieving, and it's traumatic. It's both the grieving process and the trauma that comes with that.
And no closure as well, because what you want to do is to see your child going down there being buried and knowing that that's the final resting place. But with our culture, you don't do that. You are left in the village outside, and then the women go and bury your child.
So that's another culture we know. Is there anyone who knows about the Muslim, the way they do it, or the Jewish? Anyone who has read about it or who knows about it? Maybe when you get time, you can do that.
I thought the Jewish was slightly similar to the Shona culture in terms of how we have funerals. When someone dies, people gather, they cry, they eat, they then bury, and then you have that kind of, they've gone to, you'll see them again the other side. Maybe I'm simplifying it, but I kind of thought, and there's the ceremonial, if you're unclean, etc., you wash your hands when you come from the graveside, that element.
Thank you. And I carry on so that we will be on time. We want to cover most of the things we are learning together. So in our culture, when someone dies, people gather. But there's been a challenge within this COVID-19. We couldn't gather together. And it helps so much when you are bereaved and you've got people around you singing songs, saying eulogies, with saying stories. In our African culture, the side I come from, sometimes women, especially sister-in-laws, they start to perform like the deceased. Sometimes they wear the person's clothes, or they do jokes, or they talk like the deceased. They start talking about what the person, even bad, they say, they do it about the person who is gone. So that's our culture. We've got more things in our culture. We adopt other. Sorry, I'm just making it Zimbabwean. I'm saying it's a case study because I didn't get time to learn about other cultures. So we can go and relate to other cultures. We adopt children. If your sister dies today, you take over your sister's children and look after them. But later on, when we're looking at challenges, we'll see that there's a challenge on the adoption way, but it's a good thing. We are teaching other people how to love, but although there are challenges, then here in the UK, the social services takes over. If let's say a parent dies and the children have no one to look after, so the government takes over and the social services come in to make sure the child is safe, safeguarded, and there's security on the child. And some of the young adults, they quickly go through transition because they become the family headed. They are the head of the family when their parents are gone. So most of them are forced to mature quickly because you have a lot of responsibility with you now, and there are a lot of challenges. That's what our children are going through, just to name a few. I would like us to carry on and go and look at the challenges of what we were talking about, is what we've spoken about. What are the challenges of our culture on the young children, or even family and relatives?
So we have a raised hand from Hungwe. If you can unmute yourself and speak and present your question for Constance, please. Hungwe?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Pelagia Hungwe. I've been enjoying this conversation so much since the first presenter, but there's something which touches me so much. Constance was talking about closure, and there's migration. There's two things here. We Zimbabweans, we have come to this country around the world anyway. Zimbabweans are around the world, and people, they die. Sometimes circumstance is beyond your control. You can't go and bury your beloved one. And how do you deal now with that closure?
Because this is new, we are just contributing from what we have read, what we have experienced. I think amongst us, this has happened. We've lost one or more relatives during this time of COVID. How do you close?
My question was not directed to the COVID-19, was just going
in general.
Since 2000, we have so many people have been coming in the country, their beloved ones. Some they left their husband or wife, children, parents, and they died. And you can't afford to go because of different circumstances. And there is still a word, closure, which I really want to understand. How best can one?
Yes, we have coping mechanism coming along. When we finish the coping mechanism, let me know if we cover that question you've answered. If you don't mind to wait.
That's fine. Thank you.
So we were talking about the challenges. Yes. There's one story, someone I know who passed away during this COVID-19. She was a single mother with a 12-year-old girl. So she's never been to back home with her daughter. So the daughter doesn't know any relative back home. So when the mom died, the church took over, and they said they wanted to look after the daughter, but the sisters of the deceased and the brothers are all in Zimbabwe. They want the daughter they want to look after the daughter, but they were in a dilemma because they don't know how the procedure goes, and they are worried that a girl will not know about them anymore. They will lose contact with them because they don't know when they will see that girl. So the girl in the end she said she doesn't know anyone and she doesn't want to go to Zimbabwe. She wants to stay with auntie. Auntie was a friend to mom. So now auntie took over. But the sister, one of the sisters was calling me asking what I know about here. I said about what can be done. I said, I don't really know much. I will refer you to my friend who is a social worker. They can tell you the stages of how you will be able to see this girl again. Or how you can get custody. So I think it's a process. We have social workers, maybe they can explain to us how someone can get custody, or how these relatives will be able to see their niece or nephew.
Can I answer that?
Yes.
So the needs of the child, the voice of the child has to be heard. The needs of the child are paramount. And if this daughter is, if she's saying that she would rather live here with the aunt who she's got a relationship with, that will be considered. They will look, the court will look to see who's got links with her, what links they have, and what's in the best interest of that child. The relatives might just, obviously there is blood there, but if they're worried that they might not see her, well, they can have a relationship with her here and, keep in touch. They're the adults, keep in touch, maintain those links with her, and maybe at some stage she will then visit them. So it's about looking at the needs of the child, not the needs of the adult. And that's, there might be other things as well, but social services will look at first, their first point of call is that they want that child to stay in the family situation where family are able and willing. So they might be willing, but they might not be able because of immigration status, if they're not able to come here. So, but that's just to cut a long story short. So they'll definitely listen to the voice of the child. And if she's 12, if she's able to express herself, they'll do that.
Yes, thank you so much. That was helpful. Yeah, so we are going through many challenges because of COVID-19. So all these challenges we are getting, identifying, we can be able to learn or read more on it and put the knowledge into practice so that we protect our children and young adults. Youth Step Up has come up with something that no one has come up yet or thought about it. So you need more support, you need more knowledge, and you need more training so that you can try to combat the problems we are facing. It doesn't mean that you combat all, but the little we are going to do is going to help us all. We've got more challenges. Is there anyone who is identifying problems caused by COVID-19 or some? I'll come again with what I asked. Is there anyone with the challenges they've identified caused
Yes,
by?
we've got Josine who's raised her hand, so you can unmute yourself, Josine, and ask your question, please. Josine? If you can hear us, Josine, if you can unmute yourself. Yes.
Hello, sorry about that. My name is Josine Abrahams. Right, with regards to the child and the family back home who wanted the child to be back home, the question was being answered whilst my hand was already up. I'm sorry, but I still have to say the same story, what the other contributor said, the other lady said. It's with the interest of the child. I'm not a social worker, but I'm a care manager, and I know because I've had a similar case with one of our clients, and the stages they follow is they have to work hand in hand with whoever the child wants to be with, and make sure that they work together with regards to helping this child to grow. So the social services will have to see that you are contributing towards the welfare of this young one. And when the young one grow up, she will have to make up her own decision, whether she wants to go and meet them or not. So that's the same answer she had given, but I raised my hand when before she started speaking. So I'm sorry that happened, but it's still the same thing. They have to see the interest of the child before they consider anyone else. So yes, the social workers have to be involved so that they see the well-being of the child, because that's their best interest now. They are not worried about the relatives who want the child to be with them. And again, we've been talking about trauma. That is most traumatic for this child, to be separated from the environment which she knows best, and go to live somewhere else where she has never been. And maybe these people have never spoken to her, to be honest, because we know what happens when you're over here and people are back home. They really want to be with the child because of blood relationship, but they don't know the child, and the child doesn't know them, as was stated. So the best interest of them is to liaise with whoever is with the child right now, and make a relationship between the two of them, and as well as with the child, so that the child get to know these family members through phone calls, whatever it is. There's Zoom now, so they see her now and again, and until she fell in love with them, so that she can make a decision whether she wants to be with them or not. Oh, that's my taking. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Josine. That's very generous of you to provide that information, and also clarity, so that we also understand, because we are also all about protecting the children and the interest of the child first. So, Constance, I'll ask you to just summarize very quickly and round up, because we still have one more speaker.
Yes, thank you so much. The next thing we are going to discuss was coping mechanism, which I was saying Sandra has done the work for me. It's the same coping mechanisms. I'll just go through them quickly. You should, the children should, or the carers or the relatives must have counselors. They must avoid loneliness. They must always be occupied, and introduce children to their culture, so that there's no culture shock. Teach them your language if you can, and your culture. We say visit families, read books, write articles, name your struggles, take one day at a time, revisit the loved ones' hobbies. Maybe if they liked games, you can play, routine, exercise, and eat healthily. Sandra said most of these things. Talk to someone, and what does it mean to the trainers and to the relatives? Quickly, trainers must get training. I think we should come up with a course, Epi. I can have someone, we work together, come up with a scheme of work and a course outline for this bereavement, or what we have done today. Then we should, in general, support other people who are going under trauma. There are people who are going under a lot of stress. Some don't know what they will do tomorrow. They've lost their jobs, they've lost their relatives. So there's so much trauma and fear and sadness and grief gripping people. So we should help to reduce this, and also signpost them to where they can get free resources and free food bank. Do you do food bank?
Yes, we will be doing food distributions. We will be doing that, yes.
Not wasting everyone's time. I want to thank you. We did this very well. Let's clap hands for ourselves, because we did it together.
Thank you so much, Constance. That was a very powerful segment, and it was great because it was interactive. So we're able to have different views and questions as well from the floor. So it was really, really enjoyable. We're looking forward to your training day as well, where you'll have more time to be able to give us. So thank you for that. It was really good that you spoke about also culturally that men are not allowed to cry, because sometimes within the British society, they don't understand that's what it is. And they end up piling up emotions that end up exploding. and causing all other different problems as well in the end. So just understanding that with the cultural aspect of men not being allowed to cry, we can then encourage, when we do meet men in our caring professions, we can encourage them to let it out and to say it's okay to actually cry. So what the challenge that you've also given me is to also go and find out culturally in other cultures like the Muslims and the Asian culture, what they do when they lose a child or what they do when they face trauma. So we're really, really, we're on about diversity and understanding cultures at Step Up Youth. So that's a great challenge that you've left us. So without much ado, I will move us on to the next segment. Our next speaker is Mavis Mundira, and she will be talking to us about combating loneliness under COVID-19. So a bit of a background about Mavis. She is a project coordinator at Power of the Mind Networks, a storytelling organization, and she's the author and founder of Widows of Substance, a support group for widows. So she's very much acquainted with support groups, widows, and bereavement, and she's passionate about giving women a voice. So Mavis, the floor is yours.
Hi, thank you, Epi. Now, I regret having wanted to be the last speaker, because when you're the speaker, everyone else has talked about everything that you wanted to talk about, and then you're just left with nothing to talk about. Because my topic, I think it touches on both, Constance, it touches on what, was it Sandra who first spoke? Yeah, so it touches on both, but never mind. Even if we have to say it again, it's good to repeat things because that's how they stick in our minds. Yes. So yes, we want to talk about loneliness. So the meaning of loneliness in the dictionary there in Uncle Google says, was the common definition of loneliness described it as a solitude, as a state of solitude or being alone. Loneliness is actually a state of the mind. So loneliness is defined by researchers as feeling lonely more than once a week. So that's, I think Sandra touched on that it is the state of the mind. It is also physical. It can be physical loneliness, like you are in isolation, but at the same time, it also affects your mental health. So you find that as carers, we are always running around looking after everyone else. We have this, we are very caring. That's what we are. We are caring. We run around. If someone wants a cup of tea, we leave everything. We do it. Wants a bath, we do it. Wants to talk, we do it. But we never think about ourselves, like self-care. Do we have time to think about ourselves and think about actually, am I looking after myself? That is where it is. And now it's even worse now because of this COVID-19 pandemic. You find that most of the time you are in your house, you are isolated. Even if you are looking after someone, you are with that someone forever, all the time. You don't have a break from it. You are just looking after that person. And, you know, mentally, physically, you need a break from this whole thing that you are doing day in, day out. And I'm very happy that you started something like this for carers, so that carers can become mindful of what they are actually doing. So I think it's about being mindful. So I've got several tips that I want to give you about how to combat loneliness or the isolation or being alone, the feeling of loneliness. So the first one is to explore ways of being with other people. Find out ways. You remember the government at one time was saying you're encouraged to go out to the park. Even now, I think you're allowed to be going out to the park, meeting your friends, meeting other people in the park. And then now there's another thing that's coming. It's called digital inclusion. So when we are talking about loneliness, now we have something that's called digital inclusion. That is, even if you can't go and meet physically, you can do things online that can make you connected, that can get you connected to other people. So this is what's called digital inclusion. It's a new term that has come, but it's one that we have to engage with, especially as carers, so that we can connect and interact with other people. And then you are also supposed to be more social, like sending out messages to friends. Think of those people that you have not spoken to in a long time. You know, in this, I take this pandemic as something that has come with a blessing to it. It's brought some quietness into our busy life. In UK, we've been busy, just running around every minute. But COVID-19 has brought a moment of quietness. So in this moment of quietness, that's when you think of all the people that are in your life or that were in your life that you never used to get a chance to be talking to or anything. Now you can sit there and be talking to them, call them, write to them, do all sorts of things, connect with people that you have not talked to in a very long time. You came here with your friends and you moved from London, maybe to Manchester. And from when you moved there, you've never, ever talked to these people. So this is a chance for you to be able to connect with people from afar. The third thing that you can do is to share your loneliness. I think Sandra touched on that one. It's not weakness. It is loneliness is a natural feeling, and like they have said in the definition, everyone is bound to feel lonely at one time or the other. So you accept it, accept and say that I feel lonely. But in our Zimbabwean culture now, you feel lonely and you want to open up to people. You have to have a trusted number of people that you talk to about your issues and what you have. Because if you end up talking to this person, that person, you know, it blows out of proportion. And the next minute you hear someone who you never confided in coming back and going, oh, so I heard from so-and-so that you are having problems with your husband and that. And then, you know, after that, you don't feel confident enough to be sharing your loneliness or whatever is going on in your life because you have trusted the wrong person. So I think you should have a trusted amount of people around you that you can actually share things about your life. So the other thing that you need to do as well is to do things that you enjoy. So these are your hobbies. And these are things that make you feel happy. I was saying today there are certain things that I have to do, but I don't like doing them. So because of that, at times I keep postponing. I think, oh, okay, I'll do it later. No. At times also choose to do things that you like to do. For example, some people like exercising. They love to exercise. Some people love to watch TV. They love comedy. They love whatever you love to do. Do those things that you find enjoyable. And someone has already also said about volunteering. There are many benefits to volunteering. Volunteering at times, it gives you a chance to take care of other people. It also gives you a chance to distract your mind, like take your mind away from those things that are always occupying you. And now you start thinking about other people. Say in your house, you can volunteer to be a befriender, like a phone buddy, like talk to people. Here we are doing it as an organization, like as part of the Mind Networks. We are doing a befriending project. So we've got several people who have got who phone people around in the county who have said they feel lonely. So we have been given their data, a database of these people, and then we call them from time to time, ask them how they are, their week, how their week has been, do they need anything, do they need medication or that sort of thing. That is one thing you can also do to occupy your time. You can also join on, I think as Zimbabweans we are good at this, online groups. Facebook groups. You can join those groups and you can be laughing away. They can take away whatever is going on in your life, and in that way you occupy your time. The other thing, the one other important thing is you should have a routine in your life. I know that we are meant to be in our houses all the time, and at times you just think, oh, I'll just be in my house. I don't need to have a bath. I don't need to do this. I don't need. A routine is an important element in your life. It keeps you focused. I think it brings some form of normalcy or normality to your life, like where you can't be going out, you can't be meeting friends, you can't be doing this, you can't be doing this, but there's a certain thing that you can do that you can continue doing in your house, in your own space. So have a routine. You can also start a diary if you want. I think it's good to write things that are happening in your life. Start a diary, start a journal, be a blogger, and be writing away what's happening in your life under COVID. And I think it would be nice to look back after this whole thing has happened. It would be nice to look back and see exactly what was happening and how you were coping and what were all the things that were happening. So I would encourage you to have a diary or to start a blog or start jot down stuff that happens. And then you can also be doing things that are meaningful to you. Things that bring a change to you, that are of a meaning to you. For example, you can start a family tree. You can actually sit there and be asking your mom, your aunties, your uncles, and whoever about your ancestors, about your relatives and the like, so that you can form a family tree, and then voila, you are doing something meaningful. And even if you die, even if anything happens to you in your family, you're gonna leave that family tree in there. So it's quite, and you know, like if you watch that ancestry program, have you seen some of the strange people who are connected, the unlikely people who are connected by ancestry? So it will be something quite nice if you can start it, because now you got the time to be doing it. Then you can also find sources of comfort, like having massages or buying buying stuff that makes you like a chair which massages your back and that sort of thing, to just relax yourself. And when you go into the bath, you should have all them bubble things and what have you, just to soak yourself and make yourself feel good. And then you can start being creative as well. Be creative. Such things like painting, such things like dancing, such things like writing, such things like knitting. I actually joined a knitting club. I think this week I've just joined a knitting club. I'm not a knitter myself. I'm more of a sewer. I like sewing. I like creating things by sewing. But then I've just thought, let me challenge myself. Let me start join this knitting club and see what happens. So I'm now in a knitting club. So those are the sort of things you can do, and you can actually start writing that story. I think my sister Josine will have more to talk about writing. So you can actually start your short story. You've been meaning to write about a story forever. You wanted to do it, and you didn't get a chance to be doing it. But now is the chance for you to do it. You've got enough time to be doing it. You can start writing. Writing is a very therapeutic thing for anybody because it enables you to have a voice. You can share your story out there. You can also get support from other people. who read your story and then they relate to what you've gone through, and they can come in with tips and motivational tips and that sort of thing. You can also inspire other people through your writing as well, because you might be writing about something, that a challenge that you are coping with, that you have overcome or something, and then that way you inspire other people. And then likewise, we talked about support groups. I think Sandra talked about support groups. This is how support groups form, because you have people with the same interest. Once you've written your story, other people who have the same interest will come and join you, and then you can be one big happy family. So these are some of the tips that I had about combating loneliness, and some of the things that you can do. I know we are under lockdown, but well, we have to make it work. Where is Epi? Thank you very much for having me.
Wow, Mavis, that was very, very great. It was so inspiring to hear you. Very charismatic presentation. And I also like the fact that you gave us tips for how to help others and volunteer, take our mind off bereavement or any grief or trauma by helping others, but also helping ourselves. So self-care as well, in the sense that writing a diary, journaling, or doing the family tree. One thing I'll just ask you, Mavis, is if you can buy me a massage chair and send it over so that I'll be able to cope with any trauma. But yes, I really enjoyed.
I saw it. I think I went to a spa or somewhere where they had that chair, and I've always wanted it. I think our coach will want to say more. Where can we get them?
So I would like to say thank you very much. And we just have 5 minutes to round off. I just wanted to give an opportunity for one quick question. If anyone has one quick question, you can unmute yourself and ask the question.
I just have one quick answer before we get to the next question.
Yes.
I think there was a topic raised about closure. So before we kind of lose that one, I think closure is usually a term used to refer to returning to normality. And I think Auxilia highlighted the issue of rituals that we're no longer able to do. The Jewish and the Shona culture have very similar rituals, but those rituals are very cathartic towards closure. But when you have the issue of migration, sometimes those cathartic rituals of, with the Jewish and Shona culture, there's a similarity around, you have the 40 days, the number of years and so forth and all that. So what's happening really is, it's not so much that there isn't a closure as such, because you are back to normal, you're going to work. And I think I posted in the chat that there is no point at which you will never cry again, although as time goes on, your tears and bitterness, kind of go down. So it's that cathartic journey that you might want to do at some point, but it doesn't necessarily mean that there is no closure as such, because closure is just referring to getting back to norm, whatever your norm was. So you're no longer at home, because there's something called complicated grief as well. So oftentimes you find that people enter into complicated grief where, their life is incapacitated because they've lost a loved one and it's now going into a year or so. That is complicated grief, which is slightly different from the issue of closure. So closure is actually just talking about, okay, I'm back to work, I lost a loved one, but I would love to do those cathartic rituals that we do. And so unfortunately with migration, we are thrown off, where some people, it will be 20 years before they actually even go and have that cathartic moment. So that's what I just wanted to comment on before we move on, yeah?
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Sandra. It really helps to have a psychologist and a professional on to be able to give us the right answers. So I will open the floor to any final questions before we summarize and round off. Okay, so it looks like there's no questions. So thank you very much to everyone. Just a quick reminder, we are doing a podcast for carers. It will be under Real Talk, Care for Carers. So if you'd like to be one of our speakers, or if you'd like to subscribe to our podcast, if you get in touch with us, info@stepupyouth.org.uk. And there's more information about our organization, www.stepupyouth.org.uk. Thanks, Coach Mary. She's just put that in the chat, so you can always copy and paste that. So I'd like to say thank you to all our trainers and speakers. You have done amazing. I really appreciate you taking up your time to equip us and equip the carers and the audience that are here as well. And I know a few people sent me messages to say they were unable to come tonight. So hopefully they'll be able to join us on the next sessions. Thank you so much to all the audience, all the members that attended this evening. I hope it's been useful for you. And for those that are grieving, we send our sincere condolences, because I'm aware there's 1 or 2 people that have lost friends and loved ones here on this live broadcast. So my sincere condolences, our prayers and thoughts are with you. And if you do need one-to-one counseling, do get in touch with us. It's a service that we provide as well. And if you've got any questions in between, again, keep the lines open of communication. And our next training session will be on Friday, the 8th of January. So we're going to be doing these sessions on alternate Fridays. However, because next Friday is Christmas, we're taking that off. And the other one will be the 1st of January, which will be New Year's. So we'll take that off as well. And then the 8th of January, same time, 7 to 8:30 p.m. So thank you once again. And let's stay connected. And yeah, have a good evening. Thank you.
Jerusalema ikhaya lami, ilondoloze uhambe nami, zungangishilana. Jerusalema ikhaya lami, ilondoloze uhambe nami, zungangishilana. Dawo yami ayikho